See, I have been affiliated with Fairygodboss for years now. I was a former career coach, and what I love about these conferences, these virtual events, is that it's not like you hear the speaker saying, we need to align stakeholders and leverage agile frameworks to drive scalable, data driven outcomes across teams. Like, what is that? But here you can check the comments and actually get advice from women saying, no, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to check this link. I love it. I hope you've enjoyed today. Hi, I am Christine Michelle Carter, and I'm thrilled to be your host for this next section, Defying Gravity, Reaching New Heights in Your Career. I'm the author of Mom AF, and while Wicked debuted after my book was released, the idea of defying gravity deeply resonates with me. For women, I feel like, and for me, it means I know the weight of everything I carry, and yet I'm still rising, which is the central theme of my book. If you've been following the Wicked wave, you know that sometimes the boldest thing you can do is trust your instincts and take flight, even if the world isn't quite ready for it. This panel is all about what it takes to rewrite the script, rise above expectations, and break through limits, whether you're preparing for a career change, as it sounds like so many of you are, navigating the unknown, as so many of us are, or simply asking yourself, what is it I really want? Just like Alfala and Glinda, no two journeys look alike, and that's where the magic lives. So let's meet our inspiring panelists and start this story. Let's kick things off with everybody's origin story. What part of your career journey might have been labeled too bold or unrealistic, and how did you lean into it anyway? Brooke, we can start with you.
Thanks, Christine. I'm so happy to be here. I love the theme of this session because I think you're right. For many of us, even if you are in a career you like, there is still thoughts about transition and what is next. For me, that was a very big transition. I was in higher education. I'd been teaching in the classroom for 15, 16 years, and I was teaching part-time. I liked what I did, and I knew there was something more. And when my youngest went to school full-time, pre-K, out of the house, all of a sudden I was ready. I felt like, okay, this is it. There's something more for me. I know that's true. Unfortunately, that was 2019, fall of 2019, when my youngest went away to school. So she was gone for about 6 months and then home for a while. But still, I had pricked that, like, I know there's something more. I liked what I was doing. I liked teaching. I loved communication, but I knew that it wasn't it for me. And so I actually started doing a very big deep dive self-reflection. I did a career coaching program. I got really tight on my values and what I wanted my future to look like. And I made the jump from academia to the corporate world. But it was a fantastic transition for me where I was able to take everything I'd been doing and learning for 15, 16 years, teaching in the classroom, and bring all of that into the corporate world. And I got to do things I loved most and challenge myself in a brand new way. But it felt like a huge shift at the time, especially, definitely some imposter syndrome from academia to corporate.
I think all of us can relate to that. Arielle, when have you been labeled too bold or unrealistic?
Unmute. Yes. So I'll start by saying my story is a little bit linear in that I studied advertising, design, and marketing in college and went straight into that. So the boldness in that story is that I did pick up and just leave Michigan and move to California without a job in sight, without a job offer in hand. I knew I wanted to leave. I think that was mostly a bold idea from my parents' perspective. But even as I interviewed with companies in California, in San Diego, where I plan to move, I would get reactions from the hiring managers of like, oh, you're already planning to be here. And it's like, yeah, I am. Regardless of this job, which I really want you to give me, I still plan to come here. And I could see the reactions of, this is a super decisive person. This is a person who, is going to follow through on what it is she's seeking to do. So I do want to hire this person. So I did get a job right before my physical drive out to California. But I think that was one of my really bold moves of just deciding, I want to be in a different city. I want to be in a different atmosphere. So let me just do that and I will make everything else work. outside of moving to California right after undergrad, I did stay pretty close to design. I worked in agencies, and then I became a recruiter for designers back in 2009. And I only ever stayed a recruiter for designers. So there's a few of us out there. We do all know each other, but people who have only recruited for one skill set for 15 years, that was me. And in that role, I started building teams and doing more than just recruiting, but really helping with the employer brand, helping with the brand awareness of that company, throwing events. And so the role I'm in now marries all of that together, which is so great at Zillow. But I have kind of had a pretty linear path. I think my boldest move was really just moving from the Midwest to the West Coast.
That was a bold move. I mean, and I think every generation, they're disappointing their parents are making bold moves somehow. So that's pretty bold. And Seema, it seems like you've got a fan base here in the chat, but when have you been too bold or unrealistic?
Yeah, I wish I could say there's like one moment that I can point to, but I've had a couple, and so I'll just share high level. And a shout out to all the team that's TSMs, we call them Teen Schein members that are on the call today. Thank you for coming out to support. When I started in college, and I won't take you through my whole history, so it's not a buckle up session. But when I started in college, I started off pre-med as a botany major. I ended up a religious studies, graduating with my degree in religious studies and going on to law school. So I started becoming comfortable with the pivots then, where I said, where is this journey taking me? Instead of saying, here's my final destination, I really focused on what do I see as my road signs along the way, and let me take a turn that maybe wasn't anticipated. And after graduating law school, instead of practicing law, I went to join a member of Congress, and I worked as his district chief of staff for 14 years. And then when he retired, I had this opportunity. Do I go work for another member of Congress? Do I go practice law, which I hadn't done? And then I took another pivot, and I said, all right, let me join Henry Schein, because there was all this opportunity to grow there. And I didn't have an exact role, what I was going to do, but I thought I might be able to grow here. This is a space. And, Brooke already said it, and I appreciate it. Arielle, you as well. Like there was space for me to grow, but there were alignment with my values. And so I decided that's where I'm going to go. And I really started to hone in on being a government relations person there. Right. And there was a moment in 2019 where I said, like government relations, love people, love inclusive culture, love wellness, love all of the pieces that are about human experience in the organization. And so I said, hey, I'm happy to still do a little bit of government relations, but I really want to focus here. And I went to our CEO, who, for the folks on the call know, is really awesome and loves talking about culture. And I said, this is something that I really want to do. And he was like, dig in. Like, let's see where you go with it. And so there's been a lot of pivots where but that took a lot. It took a lot to move from government relations, which has a whole different base and background, to move into something that was totally different in the experience realm. So for me, it's been a couple of, my origin story has a lot of this along the way, and I follow the roadmap and see where it takes me.
All of you said basically getting comfortable with the pivots, like Seema did. I think that I put that in the chat. That's a theme from that question. Arielle, have you ever had to stop playing the part others cast you in and start writing your own script? And what helped you break free from expectations and do things your way?
Yes, so I definitely did that. I already touched on the fact that I was in a recruiter seat for a while, but I also want to touch on what Yolanda and Ann just said in the career coaching session, was that I did find the things that I loved about my job, and I figured out how to keep doing that and do more of that and expand my role, not just on paper, but into the things I was passionate about, so that my passion came through and I became this subject matter expert on how to speak to designers, how to also speak to the companies looking to hire designers. And so my role was really just identify a good designer for the need of this company, match them up, moving in-house company side, find the right designer for this team. But I went and I sat in the design orgs and I became a part of the design orgs. I went to their conferences and their offsites and I sat in their meetings. And then I really started working on like, how can we bring the right person in, not just the right designer skill set, but someone who's going to grow with the team. So I took pride in like really scaling up these teams and building them, and the people I hired, retaining them, keeping them at the company. That wasn't really my goal, but I did that. And so I think I stepped out of the mold of a recruiter should have X amount of hires a month, and I started doing a lot more. And so I became like this advisor to the org and like this strategic partner to the hiring managers. And so that did kind of start a whole new like, well, maybe we should have most recruiters be strategic advisors to their orgs. That's happened at a few companies for me. So I would say that's how I felt like I broke the mold of what was on paper and I added a lot more to it. And that was really fulfilling for me.
I love that. Seema, government relations, like so structured, so rigid. Moving from that, what helped you break free from expectations, those expectations of that team, and do things in people?
I think what really allowed me to do that was I always look for the connecting threads in everything that I do. And so for me, the connecting thread was people. And so even in government relations, the second part of that word is relations, right? It's relationships. It's how do you build them and how do you think through what people need? What do you need? How do you get what you need working with others? And that was a part of what I did for, a member of Congress. It's part of what it makes you a good attorney, but it's also part of what makes you good at people experience. It's really thinking through people and what you need. And so I managed to, sort of think about that and bring it alongside. I'm not saying it was easy, by the way. There were lots of moments of, I already heard imposter syndrome. Like there were lots of moments of questioning myself along the way, but I tried to say what were the things that were relevant through all my experiences that I could bring with me to this one, and it gave me a stable foundation to move forward. But there were moments of I still have those moments where I question myself, and so that doesn't end. It just I just make sure that I have reinforcement on why am I doing this.
Brooke, somewhat related. There's always a moment where we often think, maybe I'm not the girl for the job, but then we end up surprising ourselves. Lord knows I did that with motherhood. So can you share a time that you overcame self-doubt and owned your space?
Yeah, Christine, I remember my parents took me out for Thai food, my favorite restaurant, to celebrate this big corporate job. And I just got an email from my boss to the team. I hadn't even started yet. Said Brooke will be doing, and there was a list of bulleted things. Brooke who? Who's that's going to be doing those things? I have no idea how to do those things. I mean, I was coming from such a different space. I sat in my first meeting, you guys, I didn't know what a OKR was. I didn't know what a KPI was. I didn't know SaaS. Like I didn't even know the language. And there was definitely a moment where I thought, how am I going to do this job? But if you are brought into a space, it's because somebody saw something so they can do this. If somebody brings you in, it means they see something. I was brought in for a reason, and so then I just listened, which I think is such an important part of transitioning and starting, as I just paid attention. I took notes, I asked questions, I knew what I knew, and I knew what I didn't know. And so my confidence came from the people around me, listening and curiosity.
I love that. They were like, Brooke's going to be the savior of Rome, and you just had to roll with it. Arielle, you come across so confident. I'm worried about asking you this question, but you're going to say, this never happened to me. But has there ever been a moment where you didn't feel right for the job? And how did you overcome that self-doubt?
I love the tee up to this question because the answer is really, I hated public speaking. In a pre-COVID world, I would never be in this environment whatsoever. I absolutely hated it. And I had a friend push me to lead a workshop, a virtual workshop. And so that felt easy. That was like my gateway into public speaking, was the virtual workshop on salary negotiation for women. And I led that, which I now lead 4 times a year, every year, but I led that and I got more and more comfortable. But public speaking was I am not your girl. I don't do public speaking. I prefer to be in the background. I still prefer to be in the background, but that was a big one. And as I did more and more of it, it became more natural. So I love the way you teed this up, because me being here, that's already like, I wasn't your girl 5 years ago for this.
You're the girl now, I tell you. All right, let's see. So, Seema, what helped you recognize your own power, especially in a moment where it would have been easier to stay small or quiet?
A lot like Brooke, I would say there was a moment where I felt like, am I asking for too much to do this? Like, am I going into a space? I know I didn't know what KPIs were. I didn't know the lingo either when I started. Right. And I came from government, and I thought, am I reaching too big? Even not just that transition, but transitioning from government to human, for the sort of human resources space. I thought, what am I just asking for too much? And I think how I got past that was to say, well, what's my goal? Is my goal my own success, or is my goal really to do something good for the organization and good for other people? Am I having an impact on others? And when I stepped away from sort of that real ego driven piece of myself that was thinking about like me and my success and where do I go and all of those things, and I really dug into what do I want for the team? Like what do I really want to accomplish here? When I was able to reframe, it helped me step out of that moment of insecurity and into a moment of real faith of this is for the good of a lot of other people too. And I think I have something to bring to that. So for me, it was a transition in thought process around let's not make this about ourselves, because it really wasn't. Let's make it about what we have to offer to others.
Arielle, I'd like you to answer the same question. When have you been able to recognize your own power, especially when it was easier just to stay small or quiet?
I rely on a lot of resources. So I'm at Zillow right now, and we have a ton of really great employee benefits, but I rely on those resources to help me identify my superpowers and what I'm good at. So talking through kind of where I fit in socially and what I enjoy doing naturally and how I can use that at work. For example, I say this a lot, but like being able to influence without having any real authority is absolutely a superpower. So like once I realized that that was something that I was comfortable with and that I was good at, then I was able to really refine that craft and then share it with other people. But I think utilizing like professional coaching resources, mental health resources, and having a third person hear you talk about your experiences, that person can also help you identify like what you're really good at, and what you should kind of lean more into or what you need to develop.
We have a question from the group. How do you balance between the fear of getting into a job where you're in over your head and having confidence that you can tackle challenges and learn new skills? Brooke, I would love for you, if you don't mind, to just continue the conversation of that moment when you were in the restaurant and saw that email. And how did you get over that fear and have confidence at the same time?
Yeah, it is a good question, because we also don't want to be confident in a way that is false or inaccurate. Also, we see those people where you go, you actually shouldn't be here. You don't know what you're doing, right? So what is the balance? And again, I think you look at the people around you. So in this case, I think anytime you go into a job space, you've probably gone through multiple rounds of interviews. I was having conversations with people who were deeply intelligent, who I respected, who had an accurate grasp of who I was. I had never misrepresented what I could do or who I was. They knew that. They had seen that. They heard that. They knew the job, and they said, we believe she can do this. So I think as long as you are honest, don't, it's like the actor who goes in and says, I can roller skate, ice skate, and ballroom dance to photography. And then they get cast in that role and they go, yeah, no, that was just, as long as you've been honest about what you can do, this is what I can do, and you show up in those spaces with those skills, you'll have to learn. But I think that's where the confidence comes from knowing what you really can do and speaking that to people.
I agree. It's easy to chase what's popular or picture perfect on the surface. Seema, how do you stay grounded in your purpose rather than getting caught up on what looks good on paper or LinkedIn?
So it's so funny because you've never, we actually, Christine and I have not met before this moment, and she's never seen this in the background, which says inspired by purpose, but this question came my way. And I would say, I think for me, part of this is the pivot that I made, right? Working for government was very public service. And that's the piece that I take with me into the role that I'm in now in employee experience, which is what's the public service that I'm doing? I think a review, a hard look at your values, and almost you have to do it, review your value system and what you're doing every so often. It helps keep you on track. It helps keep you from looking at like, what's my popularity versus what's my impact. And so there's a lot of people in the team who will shoot me notes, and not about me, but about the programming or something that we're doing. And they'll say, this was really important to us. This really mattered to me. And I keep those as a reminder. And, I just want to touch on what the question you asked Brooke a little bit, which is one of the other things I do when I'm in a moment of just pure abject, like not confidence. I will look back on things that I have done that have worked and been successful and remind myself. And it doesn't have to be in the work sphere, by the way. Did you go through a tough time in your life? Maybe it was a divorce, an illness, a child. It doesn't matter what it was. But I will go back through those moments and say, I did that. And so I can do this too, and make myself sort of aware. And I will look at notes from colleagues or friends and say, okay, there were moments where I had a real impact, and that's okay. So that keeps me grounded and steady and remembering that's what I'm here for. That's my focus. So those are the ways that, at least for me, that I try to overcome some of those situations.
We haven't met, but I do find you so, you're about community. It's very clear you are not ego driven, and I very much so appreciate that. Brooke, how do you stay grounded in your purpose rather than getting caught up on what looks good on LinkedIn?
Yeah, one of the things when we teach communication in the classroom, the very first thing we do is self-concept. You can't do anything else until you figure out who you are and where it came from. We talk about the ideal self, which is mostly helpful. It could be like you're motivating, this is who I'd like to be someday. And we talk about the ought self, which is who I ought to be. And it's almost always dangerous. It's almost always inauthentic. So whenever we think, well, I ought to be this kind of mom, my career ought to go this direction, I ought to show up this way, I ought to work 40 hours a week, I ought to, whatever the thing is, it's not coming from me. It's coming from somewhere else outside of me. So whenever I see that, the social media thing or the LinkedIn post or whatever, and I feel something, I go, is this me? Is this what I want? Is this my real self? Or is this who I think I ought to be, who I'm supposed to be? And in that moment of reflection, I'm usually able to let it go. Because, oh no, actually, I don't care. I don't like doing that thing, and I'm fine that I'm not doing it. It's not who I am.
I like that too. So, Brooke, I want to ask you a special question. We know that the education industry right now, it's hurting, and it's in the public more than I think more than people realize. Like, we weren't thinking about NAEP scores and how the country was doing in education and the defunding of different things. So when it comes to your decision to be an educator, I know that you've made that switch, but that's not a field that a lot of people choose. And I'm very curious about why you made that decision. Was there ever a time in your career, if not the education, that didn't seem flashy or trendy, but felt true to who you are?
Yeah, it didn't feel fun. I mean, I certainly felt like, well, this is so silly. I'm about to even say it. This isn't enough. I often thought that, like, what's I'm just a teacher. This isn't enough. That's not like important. That's not exciting. It's not the career trajectory that you want to talk about at parties, right? I'm just a teacher. And I made that very, very conscious decision, actually, very early on, as I was always a communication major. That was so important to me because I love communication. And I chose education, actually, because I knew I also wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be able to work part-time and do the thing I love. That was a scary decision because it felt like, I heard someone else say this earlier today, like I was throwing away what people thought I could be. It felt like a small thing. It's not a small thing. Oh my goodness, it's education, right? It's really important, but it really certainly was something I had to reconcile and think about. I still teach, actually. I still teach online in the college classroom. I have part-time college classes. I still get to keep my foot in that realm. And I'm doing the same thing. I'm just doing it to adults in a job versus adults in a classroom. Everything is teaching. It's explaining, and it's doing story, and it's connecting things to real life.
And it's the step you had to take to get to where you are right now.
Absolutely. Yep.
Absolutely. Seema, looking back, what's one career moment that changed you for good? We just heard Brooks. So what was one career moment that changed you for good, whether it was a risk, a relationship, or a leap of faith?
Okay, so I would say there's a couple, but the one that's definitive that I really remember was when I graduated law school, took the bar, and finished that part, and then had the choice to work for a member of Congress or go work for a law firm. And I had to really think about that, because let me just tell you, for those of you who know the public sector, there was like $0 in the decision to work for a member of Congress, and going to work for a law firm would have been more. And I really didn't know what to do at that moment. So I went to my dad, and he's since passed, but he was everybody has their person in this life, that person that you go to. He was my guy in this life. And so I went to him and I was like, Dad, I don't really know what to do. And he said, look, the money right now, isn't, I had gotten a scholarship to law school. So he was like, the money isn't the moment right now. It will be one time in your life. When you have kids and you're in that space, the money's going to be the moment. That's not it right now. So you have options. Before you have children and you're in a different space in your life, think about where you could go and grow. Because what you could learn in 5 years of experience before you go down another pathway, you won't get in 20 years in another space. So just think about what excites you right now, and then make a decision. And that is when I decided to go and work for a member of Congress. And I have never looked back and regretted a moment of that, not once. And so I will say, whenever I come up with a tough moment, for any of you who've lost somebody that you love, whenever I come to a tough moment, I always talk to him and I say, where do I go now? And I try to channel, what would he say to me?
I love that. The money is not the moment. I love it. You should brand it and put it on the shirt and sell them. Arielle, what changed you for good? A risk, a relationship? You have so many, but a risk, a
And
relationship.
I'm going to give you another risky scenario, but I feel like, Seema, I also took your dad's advice without realizing it, because I went to work at Uber, and we're not going to talk about Uber, but I took a risk. I went to a company that didn't have a great reputation at the moment. I went to a company to build a team. It was moving really fast. The company grew 2 times in the years that I was there, 2x, and I worked harder than I had ever worked up until that point. But I knew that that was the experience that was going to accelerate my career. So the risk was going into something that was scary. To your point, Christine, in chat, the scary thing I absolutely said yes to, but then making the most out of it. I worked really hard, and I had my first child then. She was young, so I was working hard. I was working against some stereotypes about if a new mom could really cut it here. I definitely worked hard, improved myself. I had a great time. I was actually insulated from a lot of the things we read in the press. So I had a team of women, and my manager was a woman of color. Her manager was a woman of color. I worked for an org that was really diverse. So I actually had a great time at Uber. I know that's not what people are normally thinking, but that was the role that just accelerated everything for me. And most of the people who are still in my professional life today, who I work with at other companies, I met them at Uber. So that was a risk that was totally worth it. I did take that job for money. I will say it was about the money, and that was the right move, but it was a risk, and I feel like it paid off.
I love that. That's our connection, because I worked at Zipcar. I was in the car sharing industry right along with you, friendly competitors. So that's pretty cool. If anybody is kind of hesitating about startups or companies that are post IPO, it often pays in the long run. So just take the leap. Legacy is a big word, Brooke, but it starts with small intentional actions. What kind of impact are you working toward that you hope outlasts your current role?
Yeah, I'm really thinking about something Seema said earlier, and I've heard it be pulled through Arielle's also. I mean, all of our thoughts. This idea that if you take yourself, you are not the focus anymore. If you're thinking about what you're leaving behind or what the organization is building, actually your outcomes are probably going to be better. But you also eliminate that kind of fear. It actually isn't about my performance. That was the biggest tip I'd always give students about public speaking. Switch from a performance orientation to communication. You're not going to perform perfectly. This is a communication moment. So it's not about like the thing, it's about whatever the outcome is, the organization. I think about this actually all the time. I have the great privilege of creating a leadership development program, and I get to bring every single new leader at our org through this cohort program. And I think about it often. It is the thing when it's hard. I go, what's going to be here when I'm gone? What impact will people walk back and say, oh, that shifted the way we thought about leadership? It shifted the way that we talk to each other. It doesn't matter if they say, Brooke did that. I want them to say, this program shifted the way that we think. To me, it's a relief to think about legacy. Actually, I know it feels heavy, but it means it's not just about me. It's about something bigger.
Seema, what's your legacy? What are you working toward that you hope outlasts your current role?
I'll say I have a hope, and my hope is that we continue to drive organizations in a space where we are. It's not a term, but it's a term I really like. Where we're thinking about human flourishing, that capitalism, and I'm a fan, but I think that if we move to human flourishing as our goal and companies move in that direction, then even if that's just a spark of some of the programming and things that I've done in the organization, and the organization continues, they're already that kind of company. Because let's be real, I wouldn't have joined them if they didn't have that at their heart. But if we continue to move in that direction, if we continue to drive culture in that place, if more companies do that, my hope is that any tiny spark of what I've done continues to drive us as an organization and other organizations in that direction, where we really care about the people, we center around the people, we balance it with the economics.
Seema brought up her father and the important role that he played in her life to help her make a tough decision. Alfaba and Glenda work together. We can't do this alone. And as much as society would like to pin us against one another, women just simply cannot excel or defy gravity alone. I would love to hear from each of you. Who is somebody in your life that helped you tune out the noise, trust your gut, and soar high? And we could just, anybody can come off mute for that one.
Oh, Seema, you want to go? So I was going to say my father is actually that person because he is just so naively enthusiastic about everything I do and every idea I have. So that really helps not tune things out, but it helps give you some excitement and move you away from the place of hesitation and fear. Just having this person who's like blindly championing your ideas, it's refreshing, and it's not the norm because you talk to other people and they're getting into the granular, like, okay, you need to think about XYZ and these are the risks and this is what would happen and how do you start that. But my dad has always just been so enthusiastic and so pro any idea I have. And I will say, I feel like I feel like I go to him first now when I need to get all amped up before I have to really start mapping things out. Then I can go to the other people in my network. But it's been my dad for me.
I already said my dad, and I, say that I still talk to him, but since it's passing, I'm going to tell you the folks that I really turn to, and it's probably going to be surprising for folks. It's my teenage kids. I have two teenagers, and they are my inspiration, my gut check, my bold, fearless folks that say, we think you could do this, Mom. Or like, hey, that's really cool. Or they'll say, and they'll be honest with me, because you know how teenagers do, right? Like they are. And I'll get the, bruh, what are you thinking? Right. So it is turning to them in those moments. It's interesting that we're really relying on family, but it's because those folks, and it could be a bestie, it could be anyone, those folks who really, they know you well and they're rooting for you and they're your tribe, right? They're your people, right? And they go out there for you. So it was my dad, and it is my kids now.
I'll say one, not family, although my teenagers do the same thing. But I was thinking about, I was listening to the panel earlier about diversity and inclusion, and somebody said something so beautiful about using your voice in spaces. And so I will say, when I first started in my new role, felt like I was drowning with motherhood and work. I'd not ever worked that full time with children. And I got on a call with our chief people officer. She was doing just a skip level check-in with me. And she said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm struggling a little bit with this." And she said, "When my kids were young, I used to cry every day on the way home from work." Oh, the relief that she gave me in that moment of vulnerability. She could have said, "Yeah, I know it's hard," but she was honest and vulnerable. She used her big voice at the org to give voice to moms in that space. And I just think that's something we can all be that cheerleader. When someone says something hard, go, "Yeah, it's hard sometimes, isn't it?" Like that, not even glossing it over, just recognizing it. That was such a moment for me that helped me keep going through that time.
I love that. For anyone in the audience who feels stuck, grounded, or scared to take the next step, Seema, what would you say to encourage them to take flight?
I hope that this moment encouraged you to see that it can work out in your favor. And I would say, if I don't remember the expression, it's like, if you do what you always did, you get what you always got, right? There's an expression like that. You cannot grow from that place of total safety. I'm not saying don't have safe spaces. Everybody needs a sanctuary, but I am saying you have to take a moment of risk, or you will never know who you can be. And you may be, sometimes the folks, I would say particularly young women in our organization, are a little bit scared to raise their voice. And I say, what if you have the next $1 million idea, right? But nobody knew it because it got cut here. Like, if you're thinking about it, don't think about yourself. And I've said this a couple of times, but what could you bring to others? So if you're stuck where you are, really think about what you could bring to others if you move in that direction. It will help you get over that moment of inaction.
Arielle, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to go back to one of the resources I hinted at earlier, but Bravely is one of the professional coaching resources that I have relied on religiously for the past 3 years. I formed a relationship with my Bravely coach 3 years ago, and we speak twice a week. But this woman gives me tactical strategies to compartmentalize when you're in a moment where you feel stuck, and just be able to move those feelings aside so that you can actually keep moving forward. You can come back to those feelings, but compartmentalizing is not easy, but it has helped me a lot. So I plug Bravely any chance I get. But I think if you need other tactical tips, you should just Google and look up, what can I do in a moment where I feel stuck, or I'm flustered, or I'm distracted, to help me snap out of that and keep moving forward. It sometimes sounds insensitive. I'm not saying don't come back to those feelings, but I am saying, if you let those feelings overpower you, you will be really disappointed when a month, a year has gone by and you haven't made any progress because you're still sitting in that thing. I think it's just super important for you to figure out how to put that thing to the side and keep it moving.
Thank you. Let's see, tactical recommendations. Brooke, what are your thoughts?
I invite you to try this very delicious question, which is, what else? What else could be true? What else could I become? What else could this mean? What else? When you get yourself into this generative, creative possibility space, whatever you're stuck in, ask that question. What else? What else could this mean? What else could this become? What else is out there? It's a great question for me whenever I'm feeling stuck.
I love that. Thank you all for sharing your stories, your wisdom, and your honesty. I think if it's one thing we learned today, and I apologize, I got so wrapped up in the conversations, I forgot to give the recap answers towards the end. But I think it's that your path doesn't have to be linear or perfect or approved by anyone else. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is defy gravity. Trust yourself, take the leap, and rise on your own terms. So whether you're ready to rewrite your story, embrace a career pause, or finally speak your truth at work, just remember, you've had the power all along. You just had to tap into it. I managed to make it through this whole session without singing a song from Wicked. So thank you to our amazing panelists. You provided such a rich conversation. And coming up next are today's concluding summit remarks.